Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have a horrifying subscriber interview, one that you will not soon forget. Before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. Merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. Doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. Also, if you don't want to miss any of the great content I put up, please click that bell icon and finally leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And guys, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's subscriber interview, shall we? All right, everybody. Today I have another person from the Tennessee kind of group there. It all started with GW, and then his friend Ronnie reached out and said, you know, hey, I had this experience at the same time. And then last night, Ronnie contacted me and said, hey, my cousin, who is a subscriber, reached out and said, I recognized you by your voice and by your gun. And tonight I have Rob with us. Rob, how are you?
Doing pretty good, Jeff. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I know you're working. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem at all. It's kind of a nice break away from the cars.
I hear you. So pretty much you're a subscriber, so you know what I do.
I do.
The floor is yours, my friend, so please share away.
Okay, so I guess I'll just give you a little bit of background about myself. I'm 37. I was born in January 84. Spent most of my life, when I wasn't at work, working on cars. I paint cars for a living in a body shop, and if I'm not at work, I'm doing something outdoors. I'm hiking, I'm hunting, I'm fishing, I'm camping. Anything I can do to get out of the shop and get away from the city, I can. So I guess first thing I can tell you is my grandfather, after being a truck driver his whole life, being born just outside of Jackson, Tennessee, he moved to Chicago. We'll skip forward to him retiring. So he retires, I guess I would be about 13. So, it was his third time retiring, so we didn't think it was going to stick again. He just gets that itch in the foot and wants to get back in his big rig and start driving.
Right.
And, he moved down to Tennessee to get out of the city with my grandmother. She loved it down there. She had about an acre of garden, which is outrageously huge and too big.
Yeah.
But, she loved it. So anytime she could, be out there with the fruit trees or, the tomato plants, whatever it was, Grandma was out there, tending to the garden. Well, let's skip to me getting out of my freshman year. So now I'm going to be a sophomore. And my parents decided, you know what, we're tired of you. You're causing a little bit of trouble here in Vegas. So let's ship you out for a while to Grandma and Grandpa's for the summer. So the day I got out of school, they put me on a plane, and I was down in Tennessee for the whole summer. So my grandparents lived in, we'll just say, Madison County, and not too far from my cousin Ronnie and GW.
Now that's...
I've known GW, I think, probably since I was 11 or 12.
Right. Madison County is where the Pinson Mounds are, correct?
Indeed,
Okay.
indeed.
Okay.
And I've been there many times. Just just to check it out, get out of the house, have a picnic.
Right.
Try to walk around. I found the occasional arrowhead out there. I think I found 2 or 3. I still have them. And, all I could spend the whole summer doing, all I wanted to do was fish, hunt, shoot guns. And, at the time we were stealing my grandpa's booze. And, he had a friend of his that made moonshine, so we were stealing a little bit of that. And, having a little drink and running around in the woods. Well, my grandpa, growing up down there, tried to let me do stuff that he did, which was, here's a rifle, here's some gas for the 4-wheeler, go have some fun, I'll see you when the sun goes down. All right. So the one day, me and my cousin are running around, and we find, some wheat plants growing, and we're like, okay, cool. No big deal. We stole a little bit of it. It wasn't ready, but, what did we know? We're 14.
Right.
And I decided after my cousin went home, now mind you, say that there's 7 days in the week. He probably spent 2 or 3 at my house, and I spent 2 or 3 at his house. There was maybe one night here in between where it was just me at the house. So I left Grandpa's and decided, all right, I'm going to go back out to where I found those plants. I'm going to go try to jack a little bit more of it, hoping I don't. Because, down there, people shoot first and ask questions later.
Absolutely.
The only time I know some of my family members will call the police is to pick up the dead body. So at least that's how my grandfather was. And, he raised me to be a man's man and not to worry about what other people thought too much. Just as long as you were taking care of your family and paying your bills, nobody should be telling you anything. That's how he taught me. So that's how I live my life. So I decide I'm going to sneak out, because they didn't want me running around the woods all night, because you never know what's going on, what kind of trouble you're going to get into. Well, apparently Grandpa had a little bit more of an idea than I thought. So I get out there to the plants, I steal a little bit of the weed, and I'm coming back. Now, over my shoulder, I have a 30-30 rifle, and I've shot with that gun so much, it's kind of not funny. And I love that gun. Just something about the era of the cowboy days to me was just so cool. And when I got a little bit older, I did some cowboy action shooting, kind of like the modern 3-gun stuff, but with the old guns.
Right.
Had a lot of fun with it. But to get back to what happened, I'm coming back in the woods, and like Ronnie said, there's small pine trees everywhere in the woods, and the woods aren't too thick where my grandfather's property was. It wasn't like you couldn't see anything, but on a dark night with a new moon, you can't see your hand in front of your face. It's pretty dark. Well, I never had a problem running around. I spent a lot of time in those woods, and, I knew every inch of those hills and those hollers. Well, coming back through, I start hearing footsteps, and I didn't think too much of it at first because, again, there's it's rich with game. There's deer, there's bobcats, there's coyotes, raccoons, possums, squirrels, you name it, it's there. Now, Grandpa always told me about, there being a Black Panther. Now, I never saw Black Panther, but one thing I don't think my grandfather was a liar. He never lied to me as far as I could ever tell. Now, as I hear these footsteps coming from kind of flanking me, like on my right, but a little bit behind me, I decided, okay, I'm going to stop for a second. And I don't hear anything except for my own breathing, which, I don't know if too many of your people, listeners here, know what the woods are like in the summertime at night and down south, but they're loud. You hear whippoorwills and loons, crickets, tree frogs, bullfrogs, it's coyotes. I mean, it was dead silent. It was so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. So after sitting there, real still for probably 3 or 4 minutes, I'd guess, I decide I'm just hearing shit. I don't think too much of it, and I keep walking. Again, I hear it, but now it's a little bit to my left. And I'm like, okay, there's definitely something there now. That's not just me being crazy. Because it was a misstep. Like before, the original steps, the first steps I heard, they were perfectly in time with mine. Well, the second time I hear the steps, I heard a step that landed after one of mine.
Okay.
So, woods down there filled with pine needles, and there's leaves and stuff from the fall before, and you make noise when you're walking through it. It's just, especially at night, it's pretty much impossible to get through some of this area without making noise. So I'm like, okay, there's something really there. And as I'm walking, but at a steady pace, I chamber around. And the first thing my grandfather taught me about guns, other than how to handle them safely, was keep one in the chamber. He said, there's no point in having a gun that's not loaded. It might as well be a fucking paperweight.
Right.
Excuse the language, but that's what he said. And I said, Grandpa, what do you mean? Around in the chamber and do that stuff. He goes, well, if you want to think you can put a round in the chamber first before, something happens, well, can you put on your seatbelt before you get in a car accident? And I, ever since then.
That's good logic.
Yeah, it's pretty good logic, And Grandpa, growing up the way he did, we'll just say he, they played around with moonshine a little bit. And my grandfather drove the block car for the shine car to get away. So Illinois Highway Patrol couldn't catch him. So they hired him when he lived in Illinois, and he was a highway state patrol interceptor. So if somebody was running from the police, it was his job to go run them off of the road and arrest them. So my grandfather, anyway, he drilled that in my head. So I put one in the chamber, and the other thing he taught me was, if you think you got enough ammo, bring more. So I didn't think I was going to need any ammo, but I still grabbed a handful of rounds that he had laying around, and stuck them in my back pocket. Well, I take another round, I load the gun, so now I got one in the chamber, and I think it held 5 or 6 rounds after that. And this is a lever action Winchester 30-30 that was produced in 1889. So it's over 100 years old at that point, and I'll tell you what, out to 500 yards, I'll hit one of those clay pigeons with iron sights, no problem. I had a lot of fun with that rifle. Well, now that I got the one in the chamber, I loaded an extra. I keep walking, and I get to a spot where there's a little bit of a rise, and the trees are a little bit thicker just past the rise because there's a creek, and it's a artesian spring. It's amazing water. You could just stick your glass in it and drink, and it's better than any of the bottled waters you're going to go buy at any store.
Right.
Beautiful limestone right there. So I get to the top of the rise, and I put my back against the tree, and I hear now that there's more than one thing, but I can't tell if it's 2 or 3 at this time. So what I would usually do is I would follow the creek, and come out, and it would come to the back of my grandfather's property. But on the edge of his property, there was a guy that had a soybean field, and he kept it literally just so deer would come in there and have basically a big food plot. A lot of big deer there, I don't think nothing of it at first, like I was saying, but I hit the top of this rise. I put my back against the tree, and I level the gun, I bring it up to my shoulder, and I can hear stuff moving. And now I can see that shadows, nothing else, because it's dark. We're in the woods. There's not like there's street lights and you're in the city. I can hear there's at least 2 for sure, maybe 3. Well, I fire one shot, which my grandfather at the time was sitting on his, on the porch. He heard the rifle, knew that it was that rifle, went in his house, and he had a BAR, which is a Browning automatic rifle.
Yep.
It shoots 20 rounds of 30-06 in a couple of seconds. Well, Grandpa was a gunsmith in the Milam Armory in Milam, Tennessee. And during, World War II in Korea, when he was not able to go serve because he had been shot moonshining, or running moonshine or whatever it was, he, they put him to work in the armory. So he built guns, he built bombs, and Grandpa knew his stuff when it came to that. He taught me a lot. And because of that, I'm actually enrolled in gunsmithing school. Brought a love into me that I can't get out. It's in the blood, we'll just say.
Right.
So I fire one shot, and it sounds like it runs away. Or, so I'm like, okay, cool. Probably just some stupid fucking coyotes. But I'm going to get back to the house. So from where I was at the top of this little rise to the house is probably about 400 yards, maybe 450. And the last 100 or so yards is the soybean field. And then the top of my grandparents' property, which, was like a hill. And the house is built halfway down the property. So I start jogging. And as I'm jogging, I reload. Because if nothing else, I'm going to die fighting. Because something inside of me is just telling me that this is life and death, whether I want to admit it to myself or not. Now, I'm 37 now. This happened when I'm 14. It's been 23 years, and the hairs are standing up right now just thinking about it. But I start jogging towards the house, and I hear the steps again, and I can tell from enough time hunting that it's heavy. And then I hear a second set of footsteps, and then a third.
Wow.
Well, I know I'm roughly 200 yards from the house. I'm halfway there. But that's a long 200 yards, especially the last 100 of woods. The woods are a little bit thicker on the edge of the field. A lot more brush. It's just less maintained.
Right.
And I'm running, and I hear this thing come through the fucking trees, blowing through these 4 and 5 inch thick pine trees like they don't exist. Now, you can't take one of these trees and bend it over with 2 people as grown men, 6 foot tall, 200 plus pounds. You can't bend one of these trees down. They're strong. Well, this thing's blowing through it, and I hear it coming. And now I'm just starting to clear the brush and come into the soybean field. As this is happening, I hear this thing basically put on the brakes, and it comes into the moonlight. This is the biggest, darkest, scariest fucking thing I've ever dealt with in my life. So scary that at that point, I didn't even realize it, but I'm going to be honest here. I pissed on myself a little bit and didn't quite comprehend what I was seeing all the way until later on. So I see this thing, and I fire another shot just kind of half over my shoulder, not thinking too much of it. I'm just trying to get back to the house. So I'm coming across the soybean field, and this thing starts coming into the soybean field. It probably came, well, I guess when my grandpa shot at it, it probably came about halfway through the soybean field.
At this point, can you describe what you're seeing? Like,
Okay.
I mean, because I'm sure you're not seeing it all
at
together.
first, I didn't see exactly what it was, 100%. I just knew I needed to get the fuck out of there. So once I hear, and I keep running, and I hear my grandfather open up with that BAR, I get behind this big oak tree, which we actually had to cut down because a tornado tore it all up. So I get to the oak tree, and I get behind it. And then I look, and now I can see a fucking werewolf, I thought,
Right.
but it's not a full moon. It's not even close to a full moon. It's after the full moon, it's going away. It's been a week already. And it looked, I guess, one of the combination of things would be, in between like a bodybuilder kind of build. You could see the fucking muscle on this thing, but it also looked very just straight wolfish, like from Van Helsing almost, but not quite the same in the head. The ears were a little bit different, and the snout wasn't quite as long as that, I would think. And these teeth, man, they just looked like they were ready to get a hold of me. Now, I don't know if this thing was actually hunting me and the other ones were just following it, if I came across a family unit or whatever, but all the training that I'd had before kind of went out the window when I started running, even though I knew better that if I, ran, thinking back on it, it probably could have got me if it wanted to, realistically, it probably could have got a hold of me, and maybe it was just trying to scare me out of there. I'm hoping that's what it was, but I get to the tree, and I know he's reloading. That's just, that's one thing Grandpa, he's, even when we go shooting, as a kid with a 22, there's at least enough to load the gun one more time. Grandpa's never out of ammo. So I fired 2 shots, just not even looking. I don't even care. I just did it, I guess, out of instinct. I don't know if it was coming closer or not for sure, but all I knew was if it was scared of the gunfire, then hell, I'm going to join in too. So that's exactly what I do. I fire 2 shots, and I hear my grandpa yell, "Run, run, boy, run." So I start hauling ass back to the house. So from the tree to the house is probably 65, 75 yards. It's not too far, and I'm running, and I hear Grandpa open up again. He fires another 40 rounds because he had homemade extended mags for his BAR. Well, I get in the house, and he goes, "Push the fucking safe." And we push the safe in front of the door. Now, half of the house is built into a hill, so there's nothing you can do except for dig in. But the whole front of the house at this point is all glass. It's big windows, big, huge pane windows, not like a bay window, just straight glass where one wall would be. And the house is 3 stories, okay? Now, the bottom story, which is just a living room.
Bob said to pull them in here.
All right, you're good.
So the house, like I was saying, is 3 stories tall, and the one wall is nothing but glass. So after we pushed the safe in front of the door, Grandpa's got a big gun safe, and I'll be honest, I don't know how we pushed it. When I was 14, I wasn't the biggest kid, especially at that point in the summer. It was before I had my growth spurt. So we open the safe, we're pulling stuff out. As we're loading guns and getting ready for what Grandpa thinks is going to be a fucking war, well, it's not. And nothing happens that night. Nothing else. And he's like, "Hey, I know this thing's coming back. And I've seen these things before. And you're not crazy." And I was like, "Well, are you sure?" Because Grandpa, I'm not going to lie, I was out there trying to fucking go steal some weed I found and this and that. And he's like, I don't care. You're really not crazy. But I can tell you this much. I said, what? He goes, I've seen them more than once. And they're fucking evil. And it'll be back. So let's get ready. So Grandpa decides to send my grandma over to my aunt and uncle's house for a few days. So he talks her into it and says, hey, yeah, you know, I'll take you guys to the casino in Mississippi, in Tunica, because that's not that far of a drive. And me and Robert are going to go fishing. And she's like, okay, cool. Sounds good. Doesn't think too much of it. Pretty common thing. Grandpa took me fishing all the damn time. So all we did was go buy plywood and 2x4s and built a frame to go on the inside with gun ports, basically. Well, after we get set up for what we think is going to be days worth of battling, the second night, nothing happens. Now, Grandpa's really nervous about this, and he's not telling me much at this point. So now starts the third night. Second, you know, we slept in the daytime on the third day. I didn't sleep a wink for 2 days until my body just shut down. And Grandpa, you know, says, hey, you know, get some rest. It's going to be a long night, so just be ready. So the third night, it starts out slow, and we don't hear much. We don't see anything. It's not like we need to stress about what's going on. Okay, fine. We're hanging out, and then all of a sudden you hear tick, 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 tick on the glass. Well, my grandfather liked to feed the squirrels, and they would come around at night, and sometimes they would tap on the glass, so I didn't think too much of it at first. And Grandpa says, no, stay the fuck away from the window. And I'm like, oh shit, okay. This isn't good. Well, he decides to just hand me, you know, he hands me that 30-30. Only I didn't know he had reloaded it. He had hand loads for everything. Being a gunsmith and an armorer, he had all that stuff. And taught me quite a lot about it. Well, after he hands me a gun, he picks up that VAR, and he fires right through the fucking window. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't tell me he's going to shoot. He just starts blasting. Well, Grandpa, he's a damn good shot, to the point where, you know, it became a kind of a family thing where we would get together, we'd shoot, we'd have fun, and, you know, the older people would start betting on who could beat Grandpa. Not many people could. I mean, he was good enough with a pistol that I've seen him shoot big bumblebees out of the air with a .22, which, crazy, but it's true. So Grandpa shoots through the window, and anybody who's been shooting and hunting long enough knows that there's a sound when it hits something. There's a big thud, and you can hear it hit meat. Yep. And you hear something scream. And it sounds in between a cross between a woman screaming and a big cat. I really don't have any other way to describe it too much, but we hear this thing start moving towards, I guess would be the left. And as that's happening, by the door where we had the safe propped up, we hear a roar. And this makes everything I've seen on any animal channel when a big cat roars, it makes it sound weak, like it's a bitch in comparison. Like, I never heard anything like this before, and I really hope I never hear anything like it again. And we don't hear anything else after that. So sunlight comes, and Grandpa calls a couple of his friends, calls one of my uncles, and everybody shows up with guns and dogs. And we went out in the woods to see what it was. We never found anything other than some blood spots. Down there, it's that red clay, and it can be quite hard when it's been dry for a long time. But when it's wet, that shit's super soft, it's super slick, and it leaves prints real good.
Right.
And we don't see anything at first until we start getting close to that creek bed that I told you that I would follow out to the edge of his property. And you can see, and I'm not lying here, I have the picture still somewhere. I just moved, but I could dig it out. It's a picture of a dog print, canine print, and it's 10 inches wide. My grandpa wasn't the tallest guy in the world, but he had pretty big feet for being a little guy. And this thing is twice as wide as his boot, plus a little extra. And he's like, hey, this is the same fucking thing that happened. And the guys start whispering a little bit. The only reason I'm there is because, it chased me. So my grandfather thought, like most people back in the day, face your fears, go after the thing and do the thing that scares you the most. And, we kept searching, and mind you, these are guys who, for fun, spend time 20 foot up in a tree on the coldest days of the year in the shittiest weather there is, covered in camo and deer piss. They know how to work a dog, and they know how to use a radio, and we lost everything at the creek other than the two prints, which I would guess the stride in between them would have to be probably 4.5 to 5 foot. Now, man is about 2.5 feet from the back foot, from the toe to the front foot of the heel. Now, I've tracked a lot of animals. I've shot a lot of animals. I've shot elk in Nevada. I currently live in Las Vegas right now, but shot elk in northern Nevada. I've shot elk in Washington State, up in Mason County, in a little city called Shelton. At the time, there was less than 8,000 people that lived in the city. So we'll get to that later. It kind of makes my mind jump back and forth so much. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
And I'm just like pacing as I'm telling you guys that, telling everybody this, because it
take your time, man.
Gets the nerves up. So after looking and not finding anything other than those two prints, we keep going more in the woods. And finally we get to a point where these dogs won't go any farther. They just stop. Now, one of my uncles, he trains dogs to where I would easily put some of these dogs' tracking skills up against anything that any military or any law enforcement agency has for their dogs. They're that good. And my uncle knows how to train them that well. From the stories I was told, their dad, which would be my great uncle, he's my great uncle. Their dad, which would be my great grandfather, used to train dogs for the Bureau of Investigation before it was the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My great grandfather was one of those guys that they would send out in the woods with his rifle and a little sack lunch over his shoulder and his dogs, and he would go get the guys that broke out of prison. So believe me, they can track. Well, finally the dogs won't go any farther. And these dogs will go after fucking anything. I mean, I've seen them chase bobcats and coyotes. I know one of them killed a couple coyotes one day. And if anybody knows anything about how coyotes are, they work as a unit. It's pretty amazing, really. And, usually if they get a hold of somebody's pet, it's pretty much over for the pet, because they'll fight, 5 and 6, 7, 8, 10 on 1. Well, these dogs, not being scared of that stuff, don't go any farther. They refuse. They just lay down. They're not whining. They're not crying. They're just not doing anything, which is the complete opposite of how they've been trained. They won't listen. The only thing they would do is when we finally said, let's go, we went back to the house. Well, when we get back to the house, everybody's sitting around. And they start talking. And one thing I learned even as a kid is when people start drinking, they start getting talking. They get talkative. And a lot of times, if anything is real, that's the most true form of somebody talking is when they're drunk. Whether they like something or not, they're the most honest about it because their inhibitions are lowered. They don't care. So they start drinking. And like I said, grandfather had a whole closet full of liquor. So he gets these guys going, and I hear my great uncle, my other uncle, and my grandfather talk about how this is just like the one that attacked my other great uncle, who passed before. And this great uncle is Lonnie's great grandpa. Excuse me. And he basically says, this has happened before to me. Sit down for a minute. We're going to talk about it. And he said, people in our family have known about these things for, more than 100 years. I could personally show you a gravestone with my family's last name on it that goes back to the early 1800s. They've lived in that part of Tennessee and West Tennessee for longer than I'll ever know for sure. And he said that one of these things attacked his brother when he was younger, and that it tore him up real good. And he was lucky enough to get away because, the guys were able to, the farmhands and whoever else was working in the fields at the time, because my family, grew a little cotton at that point, just like most poor people in the South. They were doing the cotton harvest, and, this thing just, I guess, snatched my great uncle and ran off with him. And, they started shooting and chasing, and, whatever happened to my uncle, I'll never know. I never met the guy that I can remember. He passed away when I was 2. And Grandpa tells me that it attacked him and it tore my uncle up. And, he could, if he was still alive, he could show me the scars on him. And my grandpa described the scars as being four of them, probably about 1.5 inches to 2 inches apart. And they thought my great uncle was going to die because the wounds were that bad. I mean, he almost bled out a number of times. But, people back in the day, being country folks, they, if anything, they learned how to doctor themselves up. And my great grandmother, doctored him up until they could get him to a real doctor, where he spent a few months recovering and always was looking to go hunt these fucking things. He, I guess from what I was told, made it like his life's mission to try to hunt and kill as many of these things as he could. Understandably so. I'm pretty sure if something like that did something that, vicious to me, I'd feel the same way.
Yeah.
And I don't know a whole lot of people that wouldn't feel the same way. But knowing what I know now, that's fucking crazy. I mean, you need basically, something bigger than a .30 caliber, that's for sure. That 30-30 wasn't enough. Those soft-nosed lead bullets, they're not going to do much. And, my great uncle there, he went out in the woods before, a lot of times, and I was told he had shot and killed one, but they had chopped up and burned the body. That's what my grandfather told me. Long time before I was alive. So again, I can't tell you 100% if that's true or not, but like I said, he never lied to me as far as I know. And that was basically the extent of what was told to me and what happened to me in Tennessee. And I have one other encounter that happened in Washington State, like I was saying, Mason County. I used to live in just outside the city limits of Shelton, Washington. I lived about 2 miles, maybe 3, from the Washington State Patrol Academy, and maybe 12 or 15 miles from the entrance of the Olympic National Forest, where when there's a problem bear anywhere around Seattle, they can tranquilize the bear and release it, that's where they take the bears to go, right, and release. So, pretty common thing to see some pretty big bears up there. I had rented a piece of property from a friend of mine and used to spend a lot of time, out in the woods. After came back to Vegas and spent a few years and got tired of it, and I said, hey, I need something different, and Washington State's about as different as it gets from, the shitty dry desert here. It's green, it's trees, lush, it's water, rain. Let's go do this. So after living up there for a few months, I get my Washington State hunting license. I draw an elk tag, and I am ecstatic because I've never hunted elk before at this point in my life. I always wanted to. I've got a bunch of whitetails in, a couple in Tennessee and a bunch in Wisconsin. I have a family that lives all over the country. So when I'm out hiking one day and I find a nice little spot where I can go sight in this rifle that I had just bought. I bought a 7mm by .8. It was a Remington. It was a 700 bolt action frame, but it was 7mm by .8. Fast moving around, not the biggest, heaviest thing, but if you do your job, it'll bring an elk down up to 1,000 yards from what I'm told. Personally, I don't think that if you're shooting 1,000 yards at an animal, that's really hunting. But that's just me, to each their own. So, I'm out hiking, and I find this spot where I can go sight in my rifle. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I can shoot across this canyon to the other side, and this will be good. So I go up there one day and sight in my rifle, and I brought my 1911. I have a couple of Wilson Combat 45 ACP 1911. They're the long frames. Great pistol, I've never had an issue with them, as long as you keep them clean and oiled. I've never had a misfunction. Maybe once or twice I had a dead primer on a round, but that's it. Well, I also have the conversion for the gun, where you can put the whole top slide on, and now it's a 22, just for target shooting. And for, pistol mechanics, so that way you're getting used to drawing the gun, putting it on target, and putting a round on target, without the cost of 45 ACP. We all know 22 is a hell of a lot cheaper. Yeah. So, so I take my rifle up there, and I take my pistol apart, I put the 22 frame on the top, and I go out there. I sight the rifle in, out at 100 yards, find a couple other things that with my laser rangefinder, I shoot out to about 500 yards, and I'm like, okay, cool. Rifle's good and sighted in, because elk season's now 2 weeks away. So all I'm doing in the meantime, when I'm not at work, is scouting for hunting. And up there they have Roosevelt elk, which they're a little bigger than, your standard Rocky Mountain elk. So some of these things are 1,500 pounds, So I'm just excited that I'm going to get a chance to hunt one, possibly shoot one, and stock my freezer. And I've never been able to get anything worth hanging on the wall yet at that point in my life. And I'm like, well, maybe I can finally get me a nice big 5x5 or 6x6 even, and all of a sudden, the person that I'm with, this guy's lived up there his whole life. He is Native American. The tribe is called Squaxin, and they have their own island. Well, this gentleman, we're going to leave him nameless, but let's just say he's a hunting guide. He spends all his time in the outdoors. And when he's not hunting, he's a commercial salmon fisherman. So he spends more time outdoors than he has indoors any time in his life. So that being said, he's with me. We get the rifle sighted in. We're playing around with our pistols, and I shoot until I'm empty with my 22, which normally, again, like I told you before, my grandpa said, you don't ever do that. You can at least load the gun one time. You save that many rounds. So I don't think nothing of it. I have one round left in the chamber of my rifle. I have nothing in my pistol, and my friend that's with me, he's got a 357 on one of the chest holsters, sits in the center of your chest. I think they call it the Kenai style. He has a pistol there because, again, he's a hunting guide, and let's be real, there's 2,000-pound bears up there. Well, maybe not 2,000, but I'm probably exaggerating there, but there's 1,000-pound bears up there. That's a pretty common thing. Now, Mason County, where I was, it's across the Puget Sound from Seattle, and it's on the peninsula. It's about 35 or 40 miles from Port Angeles, and the Highway 101, which, you can take straight up from California, right there on the ocean. It cuts through in a certain area and then runs on the inside of the peninsula on the Puget Sound all the way up to Port Angeles. Well, where we're shooting is about halfway in between Port Angeles and Shelton, because like I said, I was out running around every place I could. Well, on the way back, the dog that we had, his name was Hercules. Hercules is a red Doberman. He weighed about 130 pounds, and he looked like he was on steroids. Now, I've seen Hercules run up to a 200-pound Mastiff, cock a leg, and piss on its face because he had no fear of anything. Well, there's this big puddle on the trail. So as I'm going to walk around it, you can see something had walked through the puddle right before us, and you can see the mud swirling in the water. So we wait a minute, and I'm just trying to see, hey, maybe these are some big elk tracks, and he got scared off by us shooting, because if I can come up here, I already got permission to hunt this land, we're good to go. Well, the dog won't go any farther. This dog just starts peeing like he's a puppy getting scolded. Never seen this dog act afraid in my life, before that or after that. So we're waiting till the mud in the water swirls, it dies down, and you can see what it is. Well, that's a big fucking dog print. And for about 2 seconds, it doesn't register. A couple seconds later, I'm like, that's just like the fucking one in Tennessee. And I look at him and I'm like, hey man, we need to get the fuck out of here, like right now. Let's go, Herc. So Hercules jumps up and we all start moving towards, the truck. So at the time I got, it's like a 92 Chevy in the desert. I have it all set up like one of the trophy trucks, like a pre-runner. So not the best thing in the mud, but I got, I got a fuel reservoir in it where I can just flip a switch and it'll pump into the 2 tanks. And I think to myself, I'm like, we got to go. Let's go. So we keep moving. The whole time I have 1 round. And I'm like, oh God, whatever it is, I'm not going to be prepared for. But let's just get back to the truck. Maybe we'll make it. And mind you, this guy, he's a Native American, and he just stops. And I see him reach in his shirt, and he pulls out a medicine bag. Now, I never saw that he had the thing to begin with, but he told me later on that day that he carried it anytime he went in the woods. So he started saying a prayer, and in his language, in his native language, which I'm not even going to pretend to understand. And he says, okay, let's go. Let's keep moving. So we move to the truck, and we get in the truck, and as I'm sitting there, first thing I'm doing is, changing my slide out, putting the 45 slide back on the pistol, and, loading the magazine. So right when I'm snapping the mag in, this is a 8+1, so I have 8 in the mag, 1 in the pipe. I put the mag in, I drop the slide, there's 1 in the chamber, pull the mag back out, and I'm putting the extra round in it. And all of a sudden, something hits the back of the truck. Boom! The whole truck moves. Well, I don't, not too worried about the truck at this point, but all of a sudden, the truck's having trouble starting, which I didn't quite understand, because if anything, I always kept my stuff, in top running order, since I paint cars in the collision industry. Having good running vehicles always, number one thing in my mind. Well, I'm trying to start the truck, and it's almost like something doesn't want it to start. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's sure as hell how it felt. Finally, the truck starts to catch, and it turned out to be I had a dead battery later on, but luckily it starts, and as it's starting, the truck gets hit again. Boom. Now, like I was saying before, my truck it was set up like a pre-runner. So I have fiberglass bedsides. I heard one of these bedsides, which are, $800 each, just snap. I mean, they're just fiberglass. So I hear it snap and break, and I'm like, fuck, this sucks, Drop it in gear, and we take off. In the rear view, you can see, because it's mid-afternoon, you can see a fucking werewolf. This is before I knew about Dogman itself, and I'm like, that doesn't make any goddamn sense. My mind's racing, my heart's going. My friend that's with me leans out of the window and starts emptying his 357 at it. Now, I don't know exactly where he caught it, but he caught it in the right shoulder somewhere, or maybe the collarbone area. All I know is it folded up for 2 seconds, and then it kept chasing us. I had enough for my truck in the best time of the year. You can't go more than 15, 20 in this, and this thing comes running up and then bang, blasts the back of my truck. Well, instead of a tailgate, I have a special swing arm that I made that holds 2 full-size mounted spare tires. Well, one of the tires breaks the bolt and comes shooting into the fucking back glass of the truck and bounces off of the truck, busts the rear window out. Well, right then, my friend just leans back over. Now he's, leaning in between the 2 seats and starts shooting again. Well, finally, we get out of where it's narrow, and I can actually get on the gas. Now, that truck had maybe 550, 600 horsepower, so it'll get up and go. So I hit the clearing, and, I can see the brush start to thin, and I know where we're at. I hit the gas, and this thing just it keeps coming until right around 50 miles an hour, I'd guess. And a little bit after 50, I'm probably hitting 55, 60. And this is probably 800 or 900 yards, this big field that I'm ripping through. And, luckily I got the suspension for it. My suspension's meant to do 100 miles an hour over anything in the desert. So I'm just charging through this field. I'm hitting brush and small trees. I can tell you right now that thing, that poor truck took a fucking beating. So we get to close to the end of the field. And I really wouldn't call it a field, just a clearing in the woods, I guess, is probably better. I get to the end of the clearing, and then I got to slow down because it's single track, truck trail again. and then it's going to turn out onto the main highway. Well, right when we're getting onto the highway, we're coming out of that single track again. This thing blasts the bed of my truck again, but this time it's from the other side. And I'm turning right, so all the suspension's preloaded on the left, and the right side's up. Because if you watch anything to do with like the Baja style racing, you can see how the trucks, how the suspension is soft in certain areas, because it's meant to rebound when you jump. Well, this thing hits us as I'm turning, and my truck went up on two wheels. And luckily, I've spent enough time, racing cars and doing dumb shit as a kid to where I actually used to practice on two wheels with my old car, just for fun. I turn into it. The truck breaks down, slaps the ground again. I hear all four tires grab, and I slam on the gas. And right around 55 miles an hour. Now, mind you, this thing came out onto the main highway. This is Highway 101. This is the middle of the day. This is 3, 4 in the afternoon, middle of summer. Now, mind you, it is Washington. It's cloudy, but you can see, no problem. It had rained earlier that day. That's why the puddle was there. It rains all the time up there. Well, I hit about 55, 60, and this thing just kind of gives up. I just see it like slow down, and then it just stops. And I just see this thing, which has these yellow eyes. And it was daytime, so I wouldn't call them luminescent, but they were bright. It looks like, I guess, like when you look at a vehicle, like in one of the older ones, and they have the yellow marker turn signals.
Yep.
Okay, so it's kind of like that color, amberish orange. And this thing's probably on all fours. It's probably 5.5 feet tall. I never saw this one on 2 feet, like I did the one in Tennessee. But this thing had, it was like in between. It was like a brownish gray, which is kind of, it was just hard to describe the color, I guess. But it's a brownish gray, and then it has almost like patches, kind of, to where, like, if it was in the woods, this thing could be 2 feet off of the trail and you'd never see it. It was almost like camouflage, like hunting camo.
Right.
It was, looking back on it now, it pretty amazing, really. Like, this thing could have been 2 feet from us and we wouldn't have known while we were shooting. It could have been watching us. I'll never know. But those are my two experiences.
Wow. Now, when you got out onto the main road, this thing stopped chasing you. I
think it stopped chasing simply because I was going too fast for it.
Right. It probably pretty much knew, hey, I'm not going to be able to catch it. I'm putting myself into danger now being on the main road as well. What did your Native American friend say to you after this? Like, did he have any comments or anything during?
So he told me that he had heard stories, but he always thought that they were just kind of stories to scare the kids, right. Make them not run around in the woods at night because, that's a place where there's mountain lion attacks, there are bear attacks, some of the biggest brown bears in America, not in Alaska, they're there in that area, so these things, you're not the top of the food chain there. There's wolves, there always have been, lions, bears, and wolves, oh my. So he told me that, he had heard stories. So he said he was going to go home, talk to some people, and go back to the res and talk to some more people, and then he'd come back and see me. Well, he calls me and says, hey, meet me out by the res. Now, mind you, their reservation, they have some on shore, and then there's an island. And I'm like, well, out on the island? Or he goes, no, don't go out there. Just meet me at the entrance. So we go over there, and we don't actually go on the res. We go about 2 miles down the road to an elder's house. Now, the elder said that these things have always been there, and their people have always known about them. He talked about them and the big man in the forest.
Right.
And he said that they fight. They're at war with each other. Now, I don't know what more he knows in that, but he said that this thing marked me and that I should never go there again. So I never did go back to that particular area. Now, he said they roam. So one night where I lived, the guy I rented my house from, he had turned the workshop I had, part of it, into a commercial salmon processing place where we could process fish. So one night, now I know these weren't bear claws, but I came home from the bar. I was out chasing girls and didn't get lucky that night, but I had fun anyway. And I come home and I can see that a light from inside the shop, which there shouldn't even be a light on, is on, and there's a fucking hole in the wall. And I was like, what the hell? That doesn't make any sense. Well, at first, where I lived out there, and you can look this up if you want, I lived right behind a place called Extreme Auto Body. Not a ton of neighbors, but nonetheless, the property I sat on and the property for Extreme Auto Body were originally owned by the same person, and the body shop there had to pay their water and their electricity to my property. That's just how it was originally set up. And I don't think nothing of it at first. I'm like, what the hell is this? That doesn't make sense. So I run in the house for the sighting. I had got, it was right when the 350 Legend round came out. So I had bought, bolt action 350 Legend, and I go in the house and I grab that thing, and right then I call my Native American friend. I said, hey man, I'm not going out there yet, but call me when you're close, and then let the dog loose, because if nothing else, the dog I knew would at least bark and warn me. Well, he calls me and he says, hey, I'm hitting the driveway. Well, when I hit the driveway, or when he hits the driveway, he stops for 2 seconds, pitches Hercules, who, mind you, like I said, he's 120, 130 pounds of Arnold Schwarzenegger looking muscle on a red Doberman. He's gorgeous, and that dog's well trained. And I've seen him literally outrun a car to the quarter-mile point. So this dog can run, people can say what they want, but I've seen that dog run 40, 45 miles an hour. I've seen it happen. So the dog, he gets to me next, before my friend does. My friend jumps out of the truck. I hear him hit the horn. So then I come out of the back door. Well, there wound up being nothing there, but something got into the corner of the shop, because part of it was sealed off where we had the fish processing, and then part of it was body shop, since I paint cars. So I did all my side work, my restoration stuff, paint a lot of motorcycles too. So nothing was disturbed in the body shop side, but inside the fish processing area, tables were overturned. There was a hole in the wall that you could have had the guy from the Green Mile walk through. So we don't see anything there. And we set up a bunch of floodlights and flood all the woods around there. And now my property I rented is only 3 acres, but I have all kinds of fruit trees. I have cherries, peaches, apricots, plums, apples, pear, you name it, I got them. And they were already there before I moved in. It was just a perk of living there. You just take care of the things, and they take care of you. So nothing happens all night. We sit up all night until the sun comes up, and the next morning he goes out to the res, and he comes back and he says, "Come on, let's go talk to the old man again." Well, we go talk to the old man again, and the old man was like, "Look, you need to fucking get out of there. Basically, it's going to keep coming back, and it maybe only went into the fish because it was hungry. But, there were no fish in there at the time. But, when you process sometimes in between hundreds and thousands of fish a day, it's going to smell like fish even after you hose it out."
Right.
Well, he says, it's marked me, and this thing will keep coming until one of us is dead. So, after about a week and a half thinking about it, I went and talked to him again, and I said, are you sure? And he said, yeah. I've been out to, he had been out to my house and done like a healing ceremony and prayed and cleansed my soul, basically my spirit with an eagle feather and smoke, and prayed over me and my property. But after a week and a half, all night one night, I hear howling, and this is not a wolf. This is not a coyote. Coyotes don't howl like that. They have yips and yells and shit. And wolves they're there, but not so close to where I am, where my house is. And the next morning, after I hear all this howling, it wakes me up out of a dead sleep. The dog I had at the time, her name was Samantha. She was half German Shepherd, half Alaskan Husky. And she had, the curly sled dog tail. And Samantha was my dad's old repo partner. She was my service animal. I have a hearing disability in my right ear, and she just basically was my best friend at the time. Well, Samantha went apeshit. Now, normally when she went to attack something, she was silent. She never made a noise. You'd be lucky if you heard the clicking of the nails if she went after something. But she went apeshit, and she's just going crazy and just looking at the woods. And in more than one spot. So, I call the old man again, and he says, I'm sending people out there to come escort you and off the property. So you're not going to go back there until it's daylight. So I pack a bag just for the night. I grab the dog bowls, some food, and, 4 or 5 people show up, or 4 or 5 vehicles, I should say. And there's 3 to 5 people in each vehicle. So, luckily I had friends. So they sat out there and loaded me in, until I loaded my shit in my truck, and we got out of there. Well, when we went back the next day, the house was destroyed. It looked like the FBI was looking for, stolen money. I mean, there was holes in the plaster and the walls. There was, you name it, it was tore up. Everything except the ceiling, basically. And it smelled like piss and shit everywhere. Something had pissed and shit all over in that place, marking its territory, basically saying, and hey, guess what? Deal with it. And after that, I packed my stuff, and I gave my notice at the job. I finished a couple cars I had in process, and I would only stay there in the daytime, and only if there was at least one other person with me. And I called it quits, and I moved back to Nevada, moved back to Vegas. Actually, outside of Vegas, a little town called Boulder City.
I can't blame you on that. And, he's right. You were, the sheriff that I spoke to a while ago in Colorado was marked. And he didn't get unmarked until they were hunted down, or like you said, one of you were going to die. And
yeah.
He's still
aggressive.
Yeah, and the sheriff to this day still has not gone back to Colorado at all. So
yeah, I've been back once, and went to just, drive by the place, and felt like I was being watched the whole time.
Right. Well, I'm coming up on time, and it's getting really loud over there. Do you want to say anything to everybody before we end the interview?
Well, I guess I guess I just want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it and to let it out. And if your people are going out there to try to chase these things or get a picture, you're fucking crazy. You just are. there's nothing more in the world I wish than to think that, or than to not remember this, but it lives with me every day. It has changed my life in numerous ways, both good and bad. It opened my eyes to the reality of it's not just horror movies, but it was also the most traumatizing thing I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen some pretty violent stuff growing up in my old neighborhood in Chicago, so I never want to see one again. If I do, it'll be too soon. And to everybody else out there, I guess just stay safe, keep your eyes open, pay attention when you're out in the woods, and don't go out there unarmed.
Absolutely. All right, Rob, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it, man.
No, thank you. I appreciate it, Jeff, and you keep doing what you're doing. I'm a long-time listener, been listening for about 3 years, I guess, and I hope that what I'm talking about can just help somebody else, even if it's not to you, can just go talk to somebody about it and get it off of their chest and not be scared of talking about it. There's a lot of people that want to ridicule the industry I'm in. It's very cut and dry. It's either right or it's wrong, and what happened, like, these people don't understand that they weren't there, so they can think what they want. If you saw something, you experienced something, you heard something, if these people weren't there, they're never going to understand it. So don't stress about what they're doing. Just keep living your life. Unless they're paying your bills and taking care of you and wiping your behind, fuck the rest of them.
Absolutely. All right, brother. Have a great night.
Thank you.
All right, guys, with everything that went down yesterday, my daughter burning her legs while making mac and cheese on my way to Tom Mezek's area of his disappearance. I've not had much time to sleep, much time to do anything except take care of her, and I don't know. I guess blame myself, maybe. Should have been there, but she's almost 16, and at 13 I was making mac and cheese, and accidents happen, I guess. But so this is kind of a replay. I apologize if you aren't happy with it, but I made a promise to myself that I would always, every day, put out some sort of information or some sort of experience for you guys, because that's how important I think bringing this knowledge forth is. So with that, guys, thank you for your support. It truly does mean the world to me. Without you guys, this channel would be just nothing. Stay safe, stay happy, and healthy. There will be a bonus, hopefully, sometime today, second half, and I probably, more than likely, about 99.9% will do a live stream, providing everything goes as planned today. So, all right, guys, have a good one. I'll see you all later. Bye.